this fishing net, it will interfere with the ecosystem in the flow bed of the ocean. So people go hungry because of climate change. What are your thoughts? What is your belief? What do you think? Do you believe like the Democrats or the Liberals about climate change? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mheshimiwa Soipan, what are some of the recycling methods that you think this country can employ, keeping in mind that all the rubbish waste in the counties are dumped mostly in forested areas, and there is no way of you hear in Mombasa, in Meru, in Kisumu, in all the big towns, there's so much rubbish everywhere. But disposing it off, it all goes to the forested areas. In your opinion, or in your policy directions, how are you going to tackle the rubbish, and what could be recycled? What would be the policy? Regarding carbon credits, what is your take on carbon credits?
Thank you, Chair. To the nominee, there are communities that are actually embracing conservation, and I'll use an example of my community who live around Kirisia Forest, who in 2019 voluntarily moved out of the forest and conserving the forest. Now my question is, how do you intend to enhance participatory forest management and ensuring the forestry sector makes a contribution to poverty eradication? And my second question is this whole issue of corruption. I've seen that this administration is very keen, which is a good thing, on planting of trees, and a lot of money will be allocated to your ministry. And you know, as Kenyans, we get worried when we see a certain project at a certain time receiving so much money, knowing that someone can easily say, I planted trees and there was no rain and the trees died. So how do you ensure that you make sure that then this doesn't become a big scam?
Thank you, Chair. This climate change is actually, it is real, though by saying is hot air. You know, and I'm saying this, if you come to Nakuru, the Rift Valley basically, in Baringo, where we have Lake Bogoria, Lake Nakuru, Naivasha, the lakes are swelling to unimaginable levels. Actually, like in Nakuru, it has already consumed over 70 staff quarters. They are submerged already. It has taken out the 2 gates, and it's a concern. And also in Baringo, Lake Bogoria, and the ecosystem within that area is really, and it is. But in the process, Madam Soipan, is that there was a blessing that as the lakes were swelling, first there was not a blessing. First there was an issue of the lake swelling and consuming private land, where people own land, they have title deeds. And when the water was rising, it actually displaced almost 5,000 acres, and the owners were never compensated. But with that came with some blessing, where I don't know where fish came from. And there was a lot of fish suddenly. There was a Mzungu who was doing fish farming, and those ponds broke, and I think all the fish went, and the population. But now here is a Kenyan whose land has been consumed by the water, and fish is there. And when they go to fish on their farm, but water from the lake, they are arrested. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I'm fishing from my land, and you are arresting me. And it is serious. I said, I think just the other day, just last week, 2 young boys were jailed for 4 years. I was telling about when we had, I think it was Kindiki, on matters to do with the pro bono thing by the government. So I would really want you to address why KWS would arrest, and yet the boundaries of KWS or Lake Nakuru, as it is known, the park, they are known. but people are fishing outside the boundary and they are being arrested. So this is something that I would want KWS and maybe to give us some answers as to what would be happening. What is the compensation even for the people who are these are just normal people earning a living.
Thank you, Kikaria.
The last one.
We've heard the story.
So the question is, what measures are you going to take so that people can be able to earn a living out of their own land? Secondly, is that Kenya hosts the headquarters of both the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and the UN Habitat. How do you intend to ensure that the country is at its forefront of protecting existing forest, expansion of afforestation, and promotion of sustainable and clean environment? Thank you.
Mole.
Thank you very much. This goes to the nominee. As you are aware, Honorable Soipan, Kenya is a signatory to COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which happened last year. And the declaration is very clear that deforestation and land use must be put to the proper use. But this brings me the question whereby the appetite of land buying companies going for the large scale land within the country and subdividing it into very small pieces for profit making and leaving the host community in variable situation whereby animal migration for the pastoralists not to move from one corner to the other to subdivide, and that also caused conflict between tribes and neighbors within the country. I would wish to hear what is your interventions and to be employed to deal with this issue to ensure that we have a sustainable land use in this country. And do you propose what probably is happening in some countries like Rwanda, whereby they are collapsing villages and building town villages and leaving the vast land for the better use of land within the country for both agricultural and grazing? Thank you.
We can take one more. Emase.
Thank you. The nominee. Conservation is a function of both county and national government. What plans do you have? How will you ensure that there is collaboration in environment conservation between the two levels of government? We are aware that because of the diminishing sizes of land, our farmers are basically farming on every piece of land. There is serious deforestation, especially for some of us who come from hilly areas. You know, people have cut all the trees and they're trying to plant something to be able to put food on the table. So how are you going to collaborate with county government to ensure that we address the challenges? Thank you.
So, Pani, you can answer those 6.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think the first question was from Honorable Baya. For sure, the climate change crisis is not a hoax. When you turn around, right from, and I know the Honorable Baya knows, because even in the coastal regions, the kind of changes that we are seeing of destruction of very sensitive ecological zones is causing untold damage. The prolonged droughts that we are facing in our arid and semi-arid areas are unprecedented. The rising lakes that Honorable Gikaria is talking about, the floods that are wreaking havoc left, right, and center. But the key question that Honorable Baya raises is how do we strike a balance between focusing on a climate action while ensuring that we do not compromise the livelihood concerns of our communities. And I will quote our Kenya Kwanza Alliance manifesto on the chapter on environment. We talk about the planet, the people, and profit. And when we talk about waste management, when we talk about the issues of climate smart agriculture, it is intended to help our people to adapt as well as grow resilience to combat the negative effects of climate change. And again, we are at a point where we need to critically focus on the policy directions that we need to take, as well as engagements at the global level to make sure that we arrest the adverse effects of climate change on our people without impoverishing them. So yes, the climate change crisis is real. Honorable Dawood, in terms of the recycling modules, I had mentioned earlier that we have a new law, 2022 Act on Sustainable Waste Management. It is very ambitious, but I believe we can do it. We need to move from a linear economy of single use of some materials which can be recycled to create employment for our people, as well as to reduce waste. And the underlying principle is that of reuse, recycle, and reduce. And that is the model that is cross-cutting in the Sustainable Waste Management Act. And underlying that is one of the major principles of sustainable development, which is the polluter pays principle. And that's what we are talking about. Our producers, our manufacturers, it is high time that we take responsibility right from the source of where we are manufacturing our goods and services, our goods particularly, to make sure that our manufacturers take responsibility. If it is a bottle of plastic, water bottle, we have banned plastics, single-use carrier bags and the flat bags. There has been a modification because of certain packaging, which are allowed upon licensing. But really the direction we should be looking at is, because plastic is a petroleum product, and they contribute to a very high release or emission of greenhouse gas emissions in this country. And we need to get into a serious discussion. I know it has been very controversial and a lot of resistance from here and there, but we need to get into a serious discussion where between the national government, the county governments, the private sector, non-state actors, to know that whatever directions that we need to take, they may be hard and painful, but that is what we must do in order to save ourselves from the choking of the waste that we are seeing. So I think circular economy is the way to go. And when we start with the basics of how we handle our waste, right from the domestic level to the waste service provider, to the county governments in terms of how to deal with our landfills, which are an eyesore everywhere. The Dandora landfill that we have here. We have countless young people, and for lack of a better term, I would call them the landfill community. Young people who are always scavenging and ravaging through the likes of Dandora dam sites. We can convert that into an economic, an income-generating activity for them in collaboration with recyclers and different players to have our country move from linear to circular economy. On the question of carbon credits, my take is that we have a huge opportunity lying under the carbon trading practice. We might not have explored it to our greatest potential. The first place to start is to start with a policy on carbon trading, and being that we are having a discussion here with the parliamentary committee, I think it's a direction that we need to take, because as we talk about climate action, we must explore alternative sources of funding. Because when we talk about they call it the just transition, for example, going 100% green. It calls for resources, it calls for technology, and carbon trading is one source of potential source of funding that we need to explore. I know certain entities like KenGen are already successfully trading in carbon, and certain non-governmental organizations. We have a lot to learn and to actualize this, because it is possible for us to do this. Honorable Lesuda, Kirisia Forest actually is a very good example of communities taking part in contributing to restoration of our natural resources. The participatory forest management is a very potent and important consideration, particularly with regard to community forests, which are under the county governments. Either through the PELIS process, where with close monitoring, awareness creation, and good collaboration between the Kenya Forest Service and the communities organized through community forest associations, this is possible, where then we will be having a symbiotic relationship between the government in terms of communities participating in enhancing our tree and forest cover, while at the same time getting tangible benefits from forest resources. The question of corruption, it is real, and the President has made a clear declaration of a very ambitious tree planting exercise, which I think is the way to go, and an increase of funding to the Ministry of Environment. I will be keen, as the Cabinet Secretary once confirmed, charged with this very critical docket to make sure that there is strict adherence to the procedures that are there to make sure that we have proper accountability and proper use of resources. And we will be moving from tree planting to tree growing. So we have to come up with a sustainable model where we are not planting trees and moving away, but growing, including how the trees will be nurtured to maturity. And I want to promise Kenyans that under my watch and guard, there will be tangible and visible results in this area. Again, we have KEFRI, KEFRI is involved with a lot of research into making sure that even as we embark on tree planting and tree growing, we will be doing species matching, so that we don't do haphazard kind of tree growing across the country, making sure that different ecological zones are matched with tree species that can actually thrive in the particular areas. Honorable Gikaria, yes, climate change is real. I have said that. And this is a matter that we'll need to look into. Your question is closely linked with that of Honorable Bayer, to make sure that as we run to embrace climate action, we must match it with the need to take care of the livelihood needs of our communities and our people, and particularly with the question of rising lakes and drought and all these other adverse effects. So yes, it is something that I will take up to look into it, to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan, so that we don't focus so much on achieving a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, while Kenyans are suffering in the process of the approaches we are using. Nairobi is a global city, being I think in the whole of the global south, it is only in Nairobi where we are hosting a UN agency, and it's none other than the UNEP, which is a very key agency in the issues that we are discussing, or those that are under my docket. The UN Habitat, again, is domiciled right here. The United Nations office in Nairobi. This presents a huge opportunity when we are speaking about the need to meet our obligations under the Paris Agreement. I will be, once confirmed, taking proactive steps towards establishing a working modality with these very strategic UN agencies within our reach in order to realize our vision and ambitions around climate action and environmental protection. Honorable Mule, yes, COP 26, and we are in the run-up to the COP 27, which will be held in Egypt in the next few weeks, a week or so. And you have raised the question about, how we will make sure that the land use plans that are being, actualized, or, the practice around large-scale land buyers. This is an issue which will require an interministerial approach. The Ministry of Lands has a big chunk of a responsibility to play with regards to land use planning. And I know within the cabinet we have thematic committees, and this is an issue of grave concern that I will be taking up with my colleague in the lands docket to make sure that we are having sustainable land use plans before any project is actualized. And again, NEMA is under my docket, the docket that I'm interviewing for. And land use planning, the need for very serious environmental impact assessments to be done before any such projects are set up, is an issue that I will be taking up once confirmed for this position. Honorable Emase, the need for close collaboration between the county and national government, that cannot be overemphasized. The fourth schedule of our constitution, in dividing the functions on environment between national and county government, the function of environment, the conservation of the environment and natural resources lies squarely within the national government. But at the same time, the questions of air pollution, noise pollution are devolved. And again, under the fourth schedule, we have certain national government policies that the counties are mandated to implement with regard to soil and water conservation and even forestry. So you find that there's a very intricate link between what is to be done by the national government and what is to be done by the county government, and that leaves me with a responsibility to take up the need to engage with the Council of Governors to make sure that we are well coordinated and we see some good results in the area's environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Koech, Amisi, Raso, Ferdinand. Oh, Sharia, you want? You have not done the right thing. Raise your flag. Yes. So let's start with Koech, Amisi, Sharia, Raso, Sharia. Then we come to Rehab. We come to Ferdinand. We can take all of you now. Soipan, you'll take all these honorable members' concerns. Each one of you, one issue, please.
Okay.
Koech.
Thank you, Chair.
Mishi, did you raise as well? Okay, you'll be the last.
Thank you, Honorable Soipan. You mentioned the issue of Mau. You and I have been very passionate, but on different ends, about restoration of Mau. First of all, it's done now. It's been restored, and the fencing, and we fully support it. But in the process, many of the people who were pushed out of Mau still hang around there. It's still a problem to the forest and to themselves, because they are grouped in villages, small villages around the forest, which is a threat again, because they might just go back. And I think it is important that we find a long-lasting solution either it is going to be interministerial to relocate all those who were evicted out of Mau in a more neater way than the way it was done before. I would like to know your take on this, Madam Soipan.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, allow me to say this. We normally rebuke and admonish corruption and scoffs at those culprits, but we never praise and honor those who keep their hands off the public offer. And you can see from this file, there's no any matter of corruption raised against the nominee, and for that I want to praise you for that. And I hope you will continue keeping your hands off the public offers. You are not going to be assimilated. Over to that, my question is, of course, that this docket you have been given, you are going to be at the center of climate change. Climate change has become the global discourse. Each and every president at the UN address is always on climate change. Can you help Kenyans understand the various protocols and agreements, right from the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, all the agreements that Kenyans has, and the success of it as a country?
Russell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Honorable Soipan, congratulations for your nomination. My question is on conservancies. What is coming up in recent times is individuals, groups, and NGOs are coming up with conservancies whose management falls outside the realm of government. And yet we know KWS and KFS are the two bodies that are vested with conservation, both physical and otherwise. What is your take in terms of having a centralized management system in terms of achieving synergy in conservation? Also on the same, Marsabit Forest and Marsabit National Park actually is the only park in the county of Marsabit. But yet currently we are experiencing the issue of animals straying outside the park and destroying people's properties and shambas. But the Act 2015 that was passed in the 11th Parliament was supposed to provide compensation. So do we still believe in that act if it cannot be enforced? Thank you, Chair.
Sharia.
Chair, I'll pass. My question was asked by
Thank you.
Mheshimiwa.
Thank you, Chair.
You should emulate Sharia.
Okay, Chair. My concern is about the rapid population growth in our urban cities. What will you do to ensure sustainable use of the environment and natural resources? For example, in your county, Kajiado, if you go to Kitengera, you'll see that the residents and the manufacturing, they are next doors, and many children are developing chest and respiratory problems. I don't know what you are going to do. I think I need to hear, because I think I would suggest you work with the county government. They do proper planning. Thank you.
Ferdinand, the Honorable.
Soipan, congratulations for being nominated for this position, and I think from what you have presented today, I want to say congratulations too, because you seem to understand the ministry, the problem with the ministry and where we are. If you keep it up like that, I think the problem we have in this country is a problem of the past. However, we may do so much as a country, but our neighbors, what mechanism are you going to employ to bring the cooperation between Kenya and the neighboring states, particularly the West, so that whatever we are doing here is actually copied elsewhere. Because climate change, I think, is basically a frustration out of you. We may do so much, and from what you are saying, then of course our neighbors don't do anything, so we just back to square one. So what are you doing? What are you going to do to be able to cooperate with the neighboring states? Because of the world in which we are today, seriously, actually, we just have to do something. But I think you're up to the task. Thank you.
Good. That's just a comment. Well done.
Thank you, Chairman. Mheshimiwa Soipan, let me hear your views as regards riverine afforestation, because we seem to be blaming climatic change for our rivers drying up, as a result of which population does not have water. Many of the rivers are now dry. They either be restored through massive afforestation, or we will just forget about ever having permanent rivers in Kenya. Number two, what about sand harvesting? Another man's destructive activity, which is happening across the country. When these rivers dry up, people descend on them to make wealth by harvesting sand and selling it, as a result of which the problem deteriorates. What are your views on this?
Posing.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Soipan, I would like to hear, and many Kenyans would like to hear, what will you do that will really be like either a change or something new, or something that will go into record that you came and you did when you're not the Minister for Environment, if this Parliament approves you. And I'm taking an example. If people were to talk about the late Michuki, they will remember Nairobi River. Your predecessor, people will remember about Mao. So what will you be remembered as Honorable Soipan having done? I don't think if these international meetings and so on will make you a name. What will make you a name? And finally, when people talk about environment, Honorable Chair, through you, Honorable Soipan, people talk about green areas. They talk about Mount Kenya, come to Mao, come to Nairobi. What about the drought that is going on now in this country? What is the relationship between that one also and environment? And when will the Minister for Environment will be known in the entire area from Lodwar to Tana River? Thank you, Chair.
Monsieur, the Honorable.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. To the nominee, I just want to talk about two areas which I feel that the minister, or rather the government, has not tapped on the potential it has. One, it is the issue of the mangrove forest, which is in Lamu and Tana River, and it's about 60% of the mangrove in Kenya. That is an area which you need to look at and know what plans you have to ensure that as part of afforestation, you can tap on that. The other issue is our econ tree, the baobab. The information we are having right now, it is that there is a certain organization, and I think the name is Ariba Seaweed International Limited, which they have employed some guys in the area of Kilifi Tezo. They uproot these baobab trees and they transport it to Georgia in United States of America. So I think Kenya is a signatory to the Declaration on Deforestation and Land Use. So you need to check on this area and see how you can rescue these icon trees. The other issue, I want to echo what Mheshimiwa Mukami has just said on the issue of environmental assessment. We have mining in Coast Region in Kwale, and that is the titanium. So recently what we have found is there is some negative effect in terms of disease, and there is skin disease. So many people experiencing a skin disease as a result of the titanium. So this is also an area you need also to know. Anytime there is mining, you need to do an effective environmental assessment to know the impact, whether negative and even positive. I thank you.
Thank you. Soipan, you can proceed to answer or respond to those.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We'll start with a question by the Honorable Nelson Koech on the Mao Forest, the plight of the evictees. I know it's the subject of a court ruling that was made recently, but I must state that just like I said, in the process of conserving our environment, we must not forget the plight of Kenyans affected by certain actions that happen. Kenya is right in step with regards to the international standards on evictions and what to do with people affected by such evictions. And these are Kenyans, even from a human rights perspective, who still have dignity bestowed upon them. And I will not talk much about it. I don't know if the case is a subject of appeal, but it definitely is a matter that we cannot close our eyes to in terms of the plight of the affected communities. Honorable Amisi, I will make sure to keep my hands off the public coffers, so that if I ever get vetted by any such committee of parliament, that my file remains clean. On the global discourse around climate change, yes, Kenya is signatory to the Paris Agreement and the attendant Kyoto Protocol. We have so many other multilateral environmental agreements that Kenya is party to. Actually, the ministry has a fully fledged department that deals with multilateral environmental agreements. They come with a number of obligations and frameworks for engagement of Kenya with the globe, with the nations of the globe. From my past experience as a lawyer and having worked in various capacities with international and regional fora, I'm going to make sure that Kenyans gain maximally from each and every instrument, regional or international, that we sign to ensure complete domestication according to the Constitution. Honorable Dido Raso, the question of conservancies and the uncoordinated manner of conservancies, I think this is an area which falls squarely on my colleague in the docket of tourism and wildlife, because the conservancies are not actually under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. But I always struggle between where does the conservation of the environment start and where does that of conservation and management of our wildlife start. I mean, they are very closely linked. That I know that in the course of my duty, once confirmed for this, I will have to confront such matters, because it is conservancies are everything to do with the environment. Conservancies and wildlife are actually about it's about conservation, and so I will endeavor to engage with my counterpart once confirmed in the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife to look into the issues that you have raised, because indeed there has to be coordination to make sure that any new models of conservation are in step with the need for good governance and sustainability, taking into account the interests of the conservancy adjacent communities. On the question of the Marsabit National Park, again, the question of human-wildlife conflict is a menace that is affecting our communities. The need to actualize the law on compensation. I will not delve much into that again, because it is not within my docket, but I know I will be confronting that. And at the ministerial level, I would be keenly interested even to work closely with a colleague in charge of that particular area of concern. The Honorable Mukami, high population growth in our urban areas and the establishment of industries, some very harmful. We are currently confronted with a number of litigation around effects of environmentally unfriendly industrial developments that have happened in residential areas. This squarely falls under the National Environmental Management Agency, under my docket, and it is a question of really looking at the effectiveness of the processes that we are currently employing in environmental impact assessment to make sure that we do not compromise the quality of life of Kenyans. Because at the inception stages of every project, the question of proximity to human life has to be taken into account, especially industries which might be the subject of hazardous emissions. So I can assure you that it would be an area of keen concern to make sure that our environmental impact assessments are being employed in the proper manner. Honorable Wanyonyi, the question of collaboration between Kenya and its neighbors, very critical. We might come up with very good policies and climate actions within Kenya, but then the same actions get compromised because of the action or inaction of our neighbors. And that is the reason why we have regional and international fora where we engage on matters climate action. What I know I will be able to do is that Kenya, being the holder of the chairmanship of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change at the ministerial level, because Kenya is at the chairmanship, I know my role will be critical at the ministerial level. I will endeavor to create a rapport and good working relationship with my colleagues in the region at the ministerial level, once confirmed, again to be able to address these matters of critical concern. The East African Community is a forum again where these matters will be prosecuted at various levels, at the presidential level, ministerial level, where we can be able to find synergy in terms of the direction we take on climate action and environmental protection.
Yeah, I just want to let the appointee know that I am on the border. I get a lot of traffic of charcoal all the way from Uganda.
Yeah.
And they're actually destroying that area, coming to us. We are very strict. When you get the charcoal dealers, they tell you they are from Uganda.
Yeah.
So there's nothing actually stopping them from doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Resistance, yes. Next.
I actually have one more question.
From
three members.
Murugara,
three actually. Honorable Murugara, riverine afforestation. Yes, we can blame so many things on climate change, but within that climate change crisis is a huge percentage of our own contribution. I'm alive to that fact, Honorable Murugara, and I'm going to create a mechanism through which we can rally Kenyans to embrace environmental integrity, yeah, and behavioral change right from your own household, and that can be done. Yes, the issue of sand harvesting, again, we may hide our heads in the sand on matters sand harvesting, but it's actually a source of income for millions of Kenyans. But at what expense? Our rivers are drying up. We need to interrogate this. Again, this is a function under the county governments, but NEMA plays a critical role when it comes to, if there's need to look at, appropriate sand harvesting areas. I'm just thinking we need to engage seriously, and it is the same with the charcoal trade, where there's a ban, yet a huge percentage of our populace depend on this particular trade. So this I'm going to take head on, and we should have some clear direction, because we cannot continue destroying ourselves as we watch. Honorable Kosing, what I will be remembered for, I am focusing on two critical things: circular economy to deal with our waste management menace. Greening Kenya, again, is going to be very big for me, and I will make sure that by the end of my tenure, everybody will remember me for these two. Honorable Mishi Mboko, the issue of mangrove forests, very critical. It has become a fragile ecosystem. When we talk about the biggest carbon sinks, mangrove forests come at the top, followed by bamboo and other tree species. Within the ambitious plan that the president has rolled out, at the key core of it is the need to reclaim our mangrove ecosystems because of the critical role they play. I am made to understand that one species of mangrove in the area of carbon sequestration is equal to about 10 terrestrial trees. So that's how important it is. On the question about baobab uprooting or cutting, I would be interested. Once I get confirmed, kindly come to my office and brief me on this one, because we must take immediate action.
Do you mean illegal export?
Honorable Chair, at the moment,
some photos, yeah.
We have a total ban on logging, so it cannot be legal.
Actually, she's not talking of logging. She's talking of uprooting and then exporting live trees.
So I think it's one and the same thing.
That is the work of KEFIS, which is still under your ministry.
They term it biopiracy.
Yes.
Biopiracy.
Yes, I think it is still affecting our trees. Whether they cut, uproot, or fell, it's still destruction. And I would want to understand in which context that is happening. So, Honorable Mishi, please pray for me to get confirmed and come over and we tackle that.
You need to have vote more than the prayer.
I know. Finally, Honorable Chair, and I think this ties closely with the question raised by the Honorable Mokami on environmental impact assessments. And I think I have spoken to that in depth.
Give Daoud the last bite.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I already gave you an opportunity.
Chair, Honorable Soipan has talked about air pollution. She's talked about water pollution. Honorable Soipan, what about noise pollution? There are bars and restaurants who play loud music in residential areas, not just in Nairobi, all over the country. So we need to know how that can be sorted out, because there must be some law regarding the timings and sound protection and all that. Thank you.
Emasa, you'll be the last for now.
Thank you, Chair.
Again, being a devolved function, we must work closely in collaboration with the county governments to make sure that the licensing of some of these businesses have to take into cognizance the location, proximity to other establishments that may not. Somebody wrote me a text the other day saying that there is very loud music from a discotheque which has been constructed or established right next to a children's hospital. You know, so these are really issues that Honorable Dawood, again in very close collaboration with the different players, I will take up to ensure that we are well regulated and coordinated in how we do our planning. You know, setting up a discotheque next to a hospital or a church next to, you know, or a mosque for that matter, next to areas where, you know, pollution, noise pollution would be of concern to the people around there. We can really be able to plan ourselves well. Honorable Emase, the question of the human resource and making sure that I have a well-motivated team. As you would know, the docket is very wide with a lot of work, and this would be greatly compromised if I do not have the right manpower. For example, the Kenya Forest Service, we are talking about greening the country. The Kenya Forest Service is at the core of that ambitious program. I will be reviewing the current terms of engagement. I have already gotten reports about understaffing, and we'll be looking at the other welfare matters in collaboration with the Public Service Commission to make sure that, you know, as we become ambitious about tackling climate action, then we must have Kenyans owning the process. And least of all is the people who are working within the ministry. So thank you for raising that, and it will be a matter that I'll take up as of immediate concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Soipan. I'll give you 3 minutes to tell us your final wish.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I take this opportunity once again to thank the members of the committee, starting with yourself, Mr. Speaker, and former colleagues. Yes, former, because I'm a member of the Senate. I'm still having a challenge, you know, understanding that I'm no longer a member of the National Assembly. I am very grateful for this chance and opportunity, and thank you for the questions raised. They have been of a great challenge, really, and just reminding me of the heavy responsibility on my shoulders. The matters that are very real, the globe over, which are subjects of the current geopolitics and the global recession, because again, Honorable Chair, there is a very intricate link between environmental issues, poverty, and the well-being of Kenyans. So I understand the monumental task ahead of me, and once confirmed, I'm looking forward to good working relations with the House, the National Assembly, to make sure that we push through some of the immediate legislative and policy issues that we require to actualize our plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now release you to go to your other duties, and Sergeant, you can show the nominee the way out.
Na waziri mteule katika Wizara ya Mazingira, Bi Soipan Tuya, ambaye ndiye anaondoka kwenye kiti hicho ambacho kimekaliwa na wengi kufikia sasa. akiwa ni waziri wa 12 kufika mbele ya kamati hii ya uteuzi kueleza ufahafu wake na uwezo wake wa kuweza kudumisha wizara hiyo ya mazingira. Amechangia pakubwa katika kupata hiyo mali yake. Masuala yaliyoibuliwa na wanachama wa kamati hiyo kuhusu mambo ya mazingira